Because the US is going to impose sanctions on Ethiopia and Eritrea over human rights abuses in Tigray. A foreign policy, which is a US based news source, a very credible news source, is claiming that a decision has been finalized. And in the coming days, there could be announcement of sanctions on Ethiopia and Eritrea. Now, three very important questions need to be looked at. Firstly, what would be the nature of these sanctions? How severe and pinching the sanctions would be? Secondly, why is US imposing sanctions on Ethiopia and Eritrea? Lastly, can sanctions work or not? Firstly, viewers, so far, details have not been provided by foreign policy. Three types of sanctions are being discussed. Firstly, some security officials and government officials will be put under sanctions under visa restrictions, both Ethiopian and Eritrean. Secondly, US security assistance to Ethiopia, which is suspended, it will remain suspended. And thirdly, some World Bank and IMF programs in operation in Ethiopia will also be targeted. So these three types of sanctions are under consideration. No official announcement has been made by the US so far. After the announcement, we'll be able to see how pinching the sanctions would be, viewers. We have seen sanctions against Eritrea a few days ago. EU imposed sanctions against some Eritrean government officials over human rights abuses, but that did not bring about any change, viewers. So we are waiting for official announcement to see how pinching, how severe the sanctions are going to be. Second question, important question, viewers, is why is US imposing sanctions on Ethiopia and Eritrea? US government is getting frustrated with Ethiopian government, viewers. US made three main demands, viewers. Firstly, US called for the withdrawal of Eritrean forces from Tigray. Ethiopian government in the beginning did not confirm that Eritrean forces were in Tigray. Later, it had to confirm. It announced the withdrawal, but so far no signs of Eritrean forces withdrawing from Tigray. Nima al-Baghir, CNN journalist, just a few days ago traveled from Mekelle to Aksum. She confirmed that the main road B30 highway, Aksum-Shire highway, is still being controlled by heavy contingents of Eritrean forces. In fact, more Eritrean forces are arriving in Tigray. So the first demand made by the US has not been met by Ethiopian government. Second demand was about independent investigations into human rights abuses committed in Tigray. We haven't seen that happen as well. Amnesty International in February issued a report about hundreds of innocent civilians killed in Aksum city of Tigray. Ethiopian government rejected that report, but later international pressure came and Ethiopian government announced that civilians were killed, but most of them were TPLF-backed civilian combatants. So there has not been an atmosphere in which independent investigations can be carried out into human rights abuses in Tigray. Third demand of the US was postponement of elections. 5 US senators had written a letter to NEBE, National Election Board of Ethiopia. They had called for electoral reforms, they had called for postponement of elections, and they had called for inclusive political dialogue before conducting elections. Elections were delayed last week, but again, 2 days ago, Ethiopia announced a new date. Now, on the 21st of June, elections will be held in Ethiopia. Ethiopian government is not postponing elections. That is why the US is getting frustrated with Ethiopia. We could see some sanctions in coming days, but how severe the sanctions are going to be, we don't know, viewers. So, and can these sanctions make a difference? It also depends on the nature of these sanctions. Ethiopian government has announced some measures against human rights abuses and sexual violence which occurred in Tigray. Yesterday, Ethiopian government announced that three Ethiopian government forces soldiers have been convicted of rape committed in Tigray, and 25 soldiers are still on trial. One Ethiopian soldier has been convicted of killing a civilian in Tigray, and 28 are on trial. So Ethiopian government up till now has convicted 4 soldiers, and around 50 are on trial for killing civilians and for sexual violence and sexual crimes in Tigray. Secondly, yesterday Ethiopian government announced, it confirmed that more than 100 civilians were killed by Eritrean troops in Aksum at the end of November. But again, it has been said by Ethiopian government that most of these civilians, they were TPLF-backed combatants, and the attack by Eritrean forces on civilians was a revenge attack because one day ago, these civilians armed by TPLF had carried out an attack on Eritrean forces. So a day after that, Eritrean forces launched a counter attack on Aksum city, and some civilians were killed. Some were killed in indiscriminate shelling by Eritrean forces. Ethiopian government is trying to send a message to the US and international community that it is sincere in taking action against those who are involved in human rights abuses and sexual violence in Tigray. That is why the two announcements were made yesterday about conviction of some soldiers. Let's see what happens. Will international community be satisfied with these actions taken by Ethiopian government? We'll see in the coming days. And the nature of the US sanctions is also important. How severe, how tight the sanctions would be. That's the most important thing. Thank you for watching.